This lesson will cover information on characteristics of learning disabilities and educational impact. There are a few simulations taken from pbs.org/misunderstoodminds. These simulations are designed to help you understand what it is like to have a learning disability in the areas of reading, writing, or mathematics. As you go through the simulations, think about the difficulties you are experiencing and what supports or strategies could be put in place to help you out. Have fun! In 1963, the federal government and other concerned agencies created a task force to explore the characteristics of students with learning disabilities. They identified a list of 10 characteristics including hyperactivity, perceptual motor impairments, emotional ability, general coordination deficits, disorders of attention, impulsivity, disorders of memory and thinking, specific learning disabilities, disorders of speech and hearing, and equivocal neurological signs. This information was useful, however, none of these characteristics included academic deficits. Academic deficits include reading, mathematics, written expression, expressive and receptive language, cognition, and social and emotional issues. Today, non-academic as well as academic characteristics are defined. Reading difficulties are the most commonly reported characteristics of learning disabilities. The most severe problem associated with reading is dyslexia. However, other major issues include word recognition and comprehension. Early indicators of learning disabilities with regard to reading include rapid automatic naming, or the ability to quickly name stimuli, and phonological awareness, or awareness of how spoken language can be manipulated. Let's take a look at the following decoding activity. This is a simulation of what it is like to have a learning disability in the area of reading. Take a minute and give it a try. Now, here's the translation. How did you do? Many children who experience reading difficulties also experience difficulties with written expression. It is important to realize that many students struggle with writing. However, for students with learning disabilities, it will be to a marked degree, will persist over time, and will continue to have some difficulties despite basic interventions. Characteristics of writing difficulties can be broken down into 3 parts: handwriting, spelling, and written language or written expression. Students with handwriting difficulties may have poor written expression because they are focusing on the task of handwriting. Spelling issues can include addition of letters, omission of letters, reversals, and phonemic spellings of words that cannot be spelled phonemically. Difficulties with written expression or language may include productivity, text structure, sentence structure, word usage, and composition. This often ties in with reading difficulties. Students may be overwhelmed and confused about where to start. They may have difficulty with organization of mechanics of writing and may have a hard time developing ideas. Spelling and grammar may also present issues. As a teacher, you may see a student with a learning disability in writing turning in work that is very brief and limited in scope. Now let's try a writing activity that simulates what it's like to have a learning disability in the area of written expression. Write a short description or story based on the photograph. Try to limit what you write to 3 or 4 sentences or 100 words. Use the following rules as you write. First, Place the 3 words with which you want to begin each sentence at the end of that sentence without changing word order. Second, use on in place of an and an in place of on wherever you write those letter combinations. Third, place your concluding sentence at the top of the page. Fourth, without otherwise changing the spelling, place the letter H to the right of the letter T in all words that begin with T, and to the left of the T in all words that end with T. You may want to pause the lesson while you write. How did you do? Does the passage resemble what you intended it to? Math difficulties may occur as an isolated issue, or they can occur in combination with other areas such as reading or writing. It is important to note that these difficulties carry over into adulthood. Characteristics can be broken down into 3 areas: procedural problems such as calculation or understanding math concepts, semantic memory problems such as knowledge of math facts, and visual spatial problems such as reproducing numerals. Other related areas of difficulty may include difficulty with word problems and retrieving math information. Now let's take a look at a task designed to simulate a learning disability associated with mathematics. This task requires you to use the addition or multiplication table to answer the problems. Take a minute to see if you can get the answers without using calculators. The goal is to use the tables provided. How did you do? Were the problems difficult to answer? When we talk about language difficulties, we are talking about 2 different issues: expressive language and receptive language. Expressive language deals with a student's ability to produce language or what is spoken, while receptive language deals with a student's ability to understand language or process and comprehending what is coming in. Difficulties stemming from language can include expressive or receptive issues or a combination of both. It is important to identify and understand language difficulties because they are directly related to reading and written expression. So if a student has a learning disability in reading or written expression, they will likely have difficulty with language. Also know that a student with a learning disability can have strong language skills. The following video clip shows an 8-year-old with a mixed expressive and receptive language disorder. In this video clip, she is asked to tell information about a story that she just read. Think about what she is struggling with as you watch. For example, is she struggling to sequence sounds or produce sounds correctly? Is she struggling to put logical sentences together? Is she struggling to organize and sequence her thoughts about the story?
Hey.
Hey.
How you doing today?
Good.
What's your name?
Aubrey.
What grade are you in?
3rd.
How old are you?
8.
So, what book did you just read?
Author's Lost Truth.
Was it a good book?
Yes.
You want to tell me about that book?
Yes. Well, most of the things like that, author's first to. He wanted to come out, and then it's Sister Violet. it's scared of the dark. She's scared of the dark, and she came, and then she yanked the doorknob right on the doorknob, and he pulled, and then the babysitter came, and it came out, and then it was a good book. And they had marshmallows, s'mores, top apple. That's it.
Okay. You enjoyed the book?
Yup.
Okay.
Are we done?
Cognition, or thinking, involves a number of sub-areas including attention, memory, strategy use, metacognition, and executive functioning. Keep in mind as we discuss the topic of cognition that we are not talking about IQ specifically. When we talk about attention, students with learning disabilities in the area of cognition may experience problems with focusing on the academic task at hand or may easily be distracted. Difficulties with memory and strategy use includes a process where information is taken in or registered, stored in short-term memory where the working memory can begin to process it, and then sent to long-term memory where it can be retrieved and reused. Difficulties with memory can arise at any point in this process. However, we often see students with learning disabilities struggling more with short-term memory. There is also often difficulty with working memory because one must retain, process, and organize the information simultaneously. Metacognitive difficulties include problems related to thinking about one's own thinking and the ability to use strategies and organizational skills. Put another way, they may have difficulty understanding when and how to use strategies. In recent years, the ability to focus, organize, plan, and solve problems has been defined as executive functioning. So when you see the term executive functioning, know that they are referring to metacognition. Many students with learning disabilities are reported to have fewer friends and lower social status than their typically developing peers. A classroom environment that is supportive and builds positive peer interactions is critical in remediating these social characteristics. As with some of the other disability categories we have discussed, there can be comorbid conditions that exist with learning disabilities. In other words, multiple conditions that exist at the same time. Depression, anxiety disorders, and antisocial personality disorders have been found to be associated with students with LD. Students with learning disabilities also exhibit low self-concept related to academic and social issues, which can lead to learned helplessness. Learned helplessness is defined as a state where individuals attribute their success to external factors out of their control and attribute their failures to internal factors. This often occurs despite opportunities for success and achievement. The following clip presented by Professor Irving J. Lee of Northwestern University describes an experiment with fish that illustrates, without specifically mentioning, the behavior now labeled as learned helplessness. This clip is from the 1952 televised series Talking Sense that aired in Chicago.
One other a quick illustration of what I'm after, I suppose, can be given in terms of animal behavior. There's an experiment that it would be very interesting to perform, but sometimes it doesn't work as sharply as I shall tell you about it. It consists in taking a galvanized container, metal container about so high, and filling it with water. And the galvanized container contains some notches so that we can put a glass partition right almost in the middle. Now, this requires that we find a walleye pike or a northern pike. Doesn't make much difference, but we ought to have a hungry one if we can possibly find it. And we put him over here and let him swim around. Then on this side of the container, we take a handful of minnows, the walleye pike's favorite food. We just dump them in, and let them swim around freely. Now, if you will stand off in a situation like this, you'll notice that the pike goes after the minnows. That is, you'll hear a swish and a dull thud. And the pike will bump up against the glass and then bounce back and do it again. And we'll keep on doing that. You stand off with a clocker and count this. Now, this is no place to get into any controversy, but if the fish, it makes a difference. Whether the fish comes from northern Wisconsin or northern Michigan or somewhere else, as to how long it will, how many tries it will take until the fish quits. There are those who say that it takes a little longer if the fish comes from northern Michigan, but I won't fight that out. Nevertheless, there will come a time when the fish will stop. That is, he's learned if you go after these fish, you get bumped and you don't catch the minnows. At that point, when he swims lazily all by himself, the experimenter removes the glass partition, and the minnows proceed to swim freely, almost coming up against the pike, and some of them bang against his gills. But he knows what he knows. He knows that you don't go after those, and in the midst of plenty, he proceeds to starve, literally, and if you wait long enough, he will die in the midst of all these minnows. Somehow or other, in the presence of the happening, which made an impact, if we can think that the fish evaluates, thinks, interprets in his own way, and then proceeds to act, there's something about his behavior that isn't quite sensible. His behavior leaves something to be desired. There's something off. It's awry. Now, how can we describe the pattern of that behavior? How can one describe what happened to the pike? And I have a hunch that you can, almost at this moment, think of illustrations yourself in which human beings behave like that. And when they do, in their talking and acting, we begin to have a pattern of the difficulties that...
To recap, students with learning disabilities exhibit a range of characteristics and difficulties across academic, language, social-emotional, and cognitive areas. In general, though, it is important to remember that there is usually a combination of characteristics involved, but the most common may include academic, language, and memory deficits.